here in Wembley with Ian Bell, and Ian, now behind us we've got the venue for tonight's Euro Championship match, which you have the great advantage over me. You've got a ticket and I haven't.
Yeah.
Although there might be one or two gentlemen just down the way that we've just come who might let me have a ticket at an inflated price.
I'd imagine there's a few about who might.
We're going to have a wander around here.
Yeah,
Ian is the Chief Exec of the Police Digital Service.
Very good.
Formerly, well, exactly. Before we started, I did say to you there was a chance that I might refer to Police Digital Service as the Police ICT Company.
Yep.
Which, of course, it was just until 6 months ago.
April 1 officially.
April 1st.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And so. You've been at the helm, both at Police Digital Service and the its forerunner, the Police ICT Company, for 3 or 4 years.
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah, 3 years and a month. 3 years. Yeah,
and prior to that, you were the head of ICT. I might have your title wrong. Apologies. At Bedfordshire, Cambridgeshire, Hertfordshire.
And just before that, I was the original programme director for the NEP.
Okay, well,
so that was a stopgap in the middle, but yes, many a happy year in Beds, Cams and Hearts.
A very significant set of experience in police ICT here in England and Wales. Probably can broaden that to the United Kingdom, I would imagine. Let's start this conversation of ours though with we seem to be coming out of this pandemic. Touch wood, fingers crossed, all that. If we go back a year ago, just over a year ago, as the pandemic lockdown took hold here in England and Wales, there was a huge amount of activity. You've probably still got the scars there somewhere.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What was it like? What are you most proud about that time when the proverbial hit the fan and the, as it was, Police ICT Company was at the forefront of enabling remote working?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few things. I think we can be awfully proud as a service when you look at the national response to the pandemic. You know, we've found ourselves no different than the NHS, no different than wider blue light in a response format that's not seen anybody furloughed. We've carried on as if every day is every day, with some unusual circumstance, some shocking circumstance when we look at the response at times to all the people who work tirelessly on the front line to keep everybody as safe as they can. And then, you know what, fundamentally our job and alongside our job, the technologists, the digital leads, the change leads, everybody has very quickly had to react to what was a very different circumstance as we came to know, and probably to some extent still continues to be. And I guess in the way that we had programs like the NEP who were beginning to generate success, the National Enabling Programme was born out of functionally thinking about productivity at its heart, how we're going to start to use technology differently. Well, all of a sudden we had a showcase for it, and I think the bit for me around that whole momentum and that whole swing shift around being able to be enabled, being able to be agile, whether it's with our laptops, our tablets, whether it's about the mobility that we were beginning to have access to that became accelerated. But we also had a dependency. We had a significant dependency on the supply chain, and all of a sudden the supply chain started to dry up because everybody wanted kit at the same point, and I think one of the big roles that we played, through whether it's through the goal groups that were called, whether that was locally or nationally, what did a response need to look like? How could that be coordinated? How could we work with suppliers to the best of our fashion, the best of our capabilities, and actually the best of our persuasive nature, I guess, in the way that we might be able to prioritise some of the kit that existed, whether it was in the channel, and the channel is there for big commercial organisations to really consume from, but we wanted to make hay with that, but also then with our regular partners, the computer centres, the SBLs, the SSCs of this world, who really became massively pragmatic and looked after us at the same point and said, do you know what, we're quite happy to work really hard. They've worked hard with ourselves, with health, to say we recognise there's a real need and demand here, and we're going to do the best we can fundamentally think about what we can do to help us out. So
what was the most difficult? What was the most challenging moment in that time?
Some of the challenging moment was, certainly from a health and well-being perspective, the big driver there certainly for me in a smallish organisation, but also the recognition of all of our colleagues who are, in different circumstances, was to make sure that, we found ourselves in a position of not only looking at the culture of the organisation very differently, the agility, but also being able to comprehend the different working capabilities that people had. And, and all of a sudden, we found ourselves wanting to empower people. We've been in a position where we wanted to do that for a long time, but there was this, I guess, Bernard, the thing that crept upon us very quickly, and one thing that I wanted to accelerate was to give some of that flexibility to allow people to be as adult as they can. All of a sudden,
so flexible working, people by necessity having to work from home.
Yeah, but
people by necessity having to deal themselves with some very challenging environments.
People with young children, people with babies, people with older children, people in different circumstances, people who looked after parents. How do we make sure that once we gave a response to deliver the outcomes that we needed to do to support, the enabling business that we do on a daily basis, but also to make sure that, we had an expectation that people were having their livelihood are still at the same point in, what were precarious times.
Yes.
We have, a wealth of vulnerable people. I talk from very openly from my own circumstances, a type 1 diabetic, that that ability to have to shelter while still appreciating you've got a workforce to manage and maintain and continue to deliver. There was a bit of a, not quite on the hoof, but we learned a lot, and we learned a lot through each other in the way that we did some of this at the same point. And I guess, and I think that's a continual, a big, bold, good news story when you look across the whole of the abilities that we've got in what's been generated, not only from a tech perspective, but I guess culturally what we've learned, Bernard, as well.
So what sorts of things culturally?
So I guess, this, I think, when I first came into the service all the way back, 2009 time, I guess, I came in from a very different background, from a, corporate food manufacturing background where, some of that agility already existed, and we're coming into a culture where, I think we lived on a basis of supervision was about being able to see the whites of people's eyes, if I'm honest, and, and all of a sudden, we became really competent about still being able to manage people, still be able to converse, still be able to translate objectives, still be able to see demand and workload be delivered. But all of a sudden we were doing it by video, and that became okay. And that became translational. I guess, there's still work we've got to do. There's still legislation that needs to catch up yet again. When we talk about, even to the bizarre realms of chairing annual general meetings and stuff that says, what do we need to fix in?
Well, that also brings in a different way of doing the running the meeting, because virtual is so different from the physical, and public sector is no different from both private sector and general life.
No,
people during the pandemic and the lockdown were experiencing Zoom meetings and their equivalent for the first time, and policing will have had some experience of that, but there's a learning curve there.
So you're right. We had products like Skype, but were they well utilised previously? No, probably not. And that was stuff that we came to terms with. With Office 365 came Microsoft Teams, and all of a sudden, we were in a place as a service where evergreen and the whole evolution of continual day-to-day development of new technology was upon us. And so when functionality changed, even silly things like being able to raise your hand virtually, was a game changer. Still being able to have control and competence in a meeting because you had a facility that was available to you that, whether Microsoft made that change on a Tuesday, by the Wednesday or the Thursday we had it, and I don't think we've ever been in a position to be able to do that.
So suppliers there, you clearly staff, your own team, the wider police service officers and staff, key in their response, but also suppliers. You mentioned suppliers very early on, so let's return to suppliers. What standout moments were there in your dealings with suppliers then?
I think it was, for me, the collegiate approach that everybody recognised of, why people supply in our sector in the way that they do. I think there is this recognition around corporate social responsibility. There are all these good things, morals and ethics, and clearly everybody still needs to make a buck, and most people are appreciative of that. But what we saw from our suppliers, and especially varying account leads who work in the big, whether it's the big corporates or actually whether it's the SMEs, the considered response was actually the same. We saw real consistency, and we saw an intent to say, actually, if we need to help drive change, if we need to put extra skin in the game, we need to put effort behind that, then actually we're prepared to do that. And I think for the first time ever, when we look at the nature of our ask, clearly we'd launched a digital policing strategy, and then all of a sudden we became inhibited by this thing called COVID that probably slightly delayed some of the progress that we wanted to make, but actually it gave us a really good checkpoint when we look at some of the enablers that we can now, I guess, cross-matrix back to that strategy that says how we're beginning to perform against some of the changes that we're starting to make.
National Policing Digital Strategy, not everybody will know about. We do have in Policing Insight an international audience.
Yeah.
It would be helpful, I think, just to say a few words about that, and then what I'd like to do is just to explore what is there as the ambition number 5, which is empower the private sector. So first, the National Policing Digital Strategy.
Yeah.
A few words of introduction to that, and then let's go into the empowering private sector.
So I guess there was lots and lots of deliberation around its longevity, what it was going to say, the thematics that sat behind it. Wayne, Parks and I.
So effectively a rethink, and of the order of again, I want to say about 3 years ago.
Yeah. So we started in 2019. Wayne and I. Probably both really, really proud around the recognition of having the capability to co-author that on behalf of, the APCC, the MPCC, the buy-in from the Home Office that we got strategically with our intent of where we were.
And remind me of Wayne's title again.
So Wayne, blimey.
Sorry, I gave you no notice of that. No. But you and he. Together key in driving this forward.
Look, so there's a real plus. We've had a relationship for a long time. You become close to people. You look at the different skills, the different influences, but also the way that you cooperate, the way you collaborate over the years, and we've found that to real strength. So Wayne has been, or is about to be, the outgoing chair of National Police Technology Council. He's still the Programme Director for the National Enabling Programme, but he's also the Chief Digital Data Technology Officer for the PDS now as well, which is...
PDS? Police Sorry. Yeah.
So, and substantively what we're beginning to do is, when we look at the nature of recruitment, we can talk about some recruitment in a bit, because I think there's some real interest there as well. What we are seeing is, that real blend of, hopefully policing currency, policing expertise, blended with I guess an evolution of people who want to come in, who get morally and ethically what we're trying to do from a policing perspective. We're seeing that translate into people from the public sector and the private sector wanting to come in. But so just coming back to the digital policing strategy, so it was written on a 10-year basis, and that was deemed rightly to be ambitious. But I think what we agreed through varying groups of stakeholders, whether it's through Ian Dyson's IMORG or Katie Bourne's APCC Tech Digital Portfolio World, a recognition that we were probably within the first 3 or 4 years, there's lots of work to do around heritage, lots of work to do around legacy, that would allow us to begin to think about some of those key drivers for change, against some of the things, whether it was the brilliant work that Met and the digital public contact team we've been doing around single online home, and that really beginning to generate the work around the seamless citizen experience, or what can we do to start to think about the nature of addressing harm, what we start to do with the work we're doing with the college around the nature of creating this ethos of a digital workforce. Some big pieces of work that we've really begin to highlight now around how we start to join up initiatives, and around the big issue that I've got, Bernard, when we look at number 4 around really beginning to think about how we join up the public sector, is not just about the accessibility of data, but it's also about, there's a wealth of common stuff that happens from a tech and digital perspective, and how are we making sure that we're getting public value right in the use of that public power, when we start to talk about some of the initiatives we've got from a programme perspective around what we're delivering, we're really starting to have some healthy conversations now with the NHS, whether that's with their digital teams, whether that's the X teams. We're also having that with soccer team and the local authority. So there's a real sense of purpose and join up around the nature of some of the messages that are coming out. I think that's quite healthy.
One of the real challenges that I've seen in dare I say, my 30 years working in policing
Yeah.
has been the complex stakeholder profile that you've got. Police ICT has, in the England and Wales, always had well in excess of the 43 forces, geographic forces that there are, and their chiefs. But you go well beyond that into the very large variety and number of stakeholders that you will need to engage with, get on side. You've got Home Office, you've got suppliers. Yeah. Isn't that a complete nightmare for you?
Do you know what? It keeps it real, I guess, and it keeps it. It keeps our feet on the ground. It keeps us back to the purpose of why we're being asked to do, and the relationship that we're trying to generate is this whole recognition around being trusted, being credible, being able to work on behalf of and with. So it's not about some of the old mistakes that were made in the past about thinking up and recognising where there might be opportunity, might be initiative, and we just run off and do that. To now is about being informed, and now is about making sure that we plug into a landscape that allows us to really make sure that we do stuff, and when we do stuff, we do it well, and we do it with purpose, and we do it that recognises, hopefully, some form of demand impact back locally on the positive.
You probably can't say this, I can, because but life would be so much easier if there were fewer forces, and there's been a lot of talk about fewer forces. It would make your life easier having far fewer stakeholders, but I'm not going to pin you to that.
No, look, there are much more people who talk about it more eloquently than I. We've seen people like Martin come out and be quite outspoken. I guess for me, do you know what the real plus of having what we have at this point is? There are some brilliant people who work locally, and the opportunity to think about how innovation is delivered, how we can still do some of that at pace locally, and how, I guess, in some fashion we can look to scale some of that and really begin to think about how we put some of that work on a pedestal. How do we think about some of the reuse capability? How do we think about some of the change drivers that come with some of this stuff that offers real benefits? So that's
not just because you're walking with me, but I've got to say that's a great answer. That actually, it touches on another element of my own wish for policing, if you like, and certainly in the area of forces and others better sharing good and excellent practice. It is a whole country mile better than it was 20, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago. But there must be a challenge there also for the police digital service and for you, in that there will be some forces, and it doesn't have to be just a single ICT related area, but there will be some forces that actually get it and are pretty darn good, and then at the other extreme there will be forces that it's for PDS to lead them on a journey, or rather to show them a journey, not to lead them, because they need to be taking that journey willingly.
I think that's right. Look, there's no, I guess, what we want to find ourselves, I talk about the whole on demand, on behalf of and with element, Bernard, and I say that with ultimate sincerity. I look at, your point around being able to generate this capability to share practice. What if we didn't have National Police Technology Council, if we didn't have the Business Change Council, we didn't have PAB to drive our national security agenda around, how we begin to generate more commonality, more opportunity to converge where applicable, using some of these capabilities that then we're now generating, using some of the platforms that we've now got to be able to share that best practice and expertise. Well, actually, do you know what? Some of that becomes quite self-serving, hopefully, and forces begin to adopt some of that at their own pace. There is some stuff, that we'll see, we continue, disappointingly to see national programs delay, and I guess that allows in some fashion local programs to be able to take a bit of a leap forward, but I guess that also creates a hindrance at some point when we talk about the nature of planning, we talk about the variable nature of unmanageable cost. So there are a few headaches that are dotted around that are there for everybody, and I guess
sure there's plenty of headaches.
Oh yeah, but yeah, we try to be as open-minded as we can, I guess.
So supposing, just in this sort of theoretical world, hypothetical world, there were a force that were less enamoured of PDS, police digital service. What's the process of encouraging them to be as on side, if I can call it that, as a force, because there's 43 plus, so there's going to be some differences there, aren't there?
Do you know, we've all been in this game a while, Bernard, as we know, and and I am ever the pragmatic that wants to find ourselves in a position where we can drive as much collaboration as we can bring as much thought leadership to this position in as much as we're allowed to do so. My encouragement is to get folk to be as engaging as they can be, but there is also the recognition that certainly from a PDS perspective we've got a lot to do to land the organisation this year as well. So there is, we've called out more often than not that this is a pathfinder year for this organisation. We've got new remit, new agenda that goes beyond what the old company was. We've got a lot to do to land operating models, to land new process, to make sure that we are fit for purpose, whether that's from a financial perspective, whether that's from process orientation, whether that's about all the recruitment. And if we get that right, then hopefully the steps that we need to make towards trusted and credible and making people want to come to us, and wanting to work around helping develop, what does good practice look like? What does, this, I guess, centre of, people talk about, having national centres of excellence, and I'm not sure you can pin anything on excellence, but what I would like to pin stuff is generating a capability that has expertise, that offers that right support, and should it be there for the nature of wanting to do stuff in the strategy and innovation space, whether it's just about delivering national programmes and delivering them well, with the portfolio that we've picked up this year, having the responsibility to have 12 or 15 national capability programmes is a big ask in year one, and we need to make sure that we focus on getting our deliverables across the line, generating, and getting people to believe and buy into what we're trying to achieve for all those purposes.
So a very ambitious, a very challenging agenda there. You are recruiting more staff.
We are.
And yet, from where the way I've seen things over the last many years, actually, the private sector is able to pay more competitively than public sector, and understandably, you'd want the very best people. So how do you square that circle then? We're on a massive recruitment drive, and I think that's great to see for our sector. Whether it's about ourselves or whether it's about support back into local forces. Whether it's some of the things that we wanted to stand this organisation up for is, there are a lot of people who believe in the system that we work in for all the right reasons. Like you said, people have been around for 30 years backwards, to my 13 or 14 seems quite minor now in some of that vein. But how do we offer, I guess, credible further opportunity? How do we offer, career development, people who might be, enticed to come and work in the middle? Working in the centre is clearly very different to working locally, but we all hope the purpose and the challenge is exactly the same, and I think that's the message that goes out in our recruitment packs. We've thought long and hard about purposely, how do we land PDS well? What does the brand look like? How do we, I guess, encourage with the right words, the right visions, the right motivations, not only to look at the career development, whether that's secondments or people coming out the force and wanting to take up positions in the PDS, or, to your point, being able to track people from externally. And do you know what? I've been staggered, absolutely staggered by the take-up. For the first time ever, we've taken, I'm assuming that's meaning an excellent take-up rather than nobody.
We've
so
taken
it's at the end
on the
of
challenge this year at doing the recruitment ourselves. And it was a massive risk that said, how do we automate the recruitment process? What does some of that look like? We've we've got some great tools, we've got some great people who work in our HR and talent team. You know, fundamentally, how do we look at that rather than going out, you know, and being fed CVs from recruitment agencies and stuff? And there's no offence to any of that process, but you know, we wanted to take time. If we're going to build new teams, then actually all of our SLTs, our SMTs, our recruiting managers needed to be part of getting that process right. And so, you know, our first round, you know, we call them recruitment tranches. You know, tranche 1 was 12 jobs. There were over 470 applications across those jobs. It was phenomenal, you know. And of course, you know, there's stuff that naturally gets weeded out, but some of the expertise that we were seeing that came from, you know, we've got people who are coming from John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's. You know, we're in the process of just negotiating final contracts for a couple of the big roles that sit within the PDS, and you know, the competition that's coming externally, we're absolutely over the moon with, you know. And what it should do is give us a real blend and balance of, you know, what, especially when we look at some of the work around data, some of the initiatives that we need to change from a data perspective. You know, people who will bring a wealth of background around AI, analytics, ML, you know, all the good buzzwords. Actually, we marry that with the work that we're doing across our new data architectures, across our data standards. You know, the progress that we've made over the last year or so in some of that space. Again, one informed by the strategy, but secondly, also led then by the forces of purposely saying, you know, we're beginning to believe in some of this stuff. How do we look at some of those change drivers? How do we, I guess, commission stuff that comes from the PDS as well at the same time to give us product to, you know, to really begin to shape the purpose, what some of those future capabilities will look like, you know. And I think for me, if we can get that right, if we can get those skills in that really enhance what we believe in for all the purposes, you know, we've been talking about for the last few minutes, then, you know what, hopefully we're on to a good thing.
Ian, we're at the front of the Wembley Stadium here. We've walked, so I'm just going to turn the camera around. So we came down from here, Wembley Park Station up there. It's been fascinating, thank you so much. Before though we wrap up, so this is very much part of my piece of friendship talk. And one of the things I have been doing right at the end of each interview is to ask the interviewee about the charity that they would wish to support. Now, it's with a degree of trepidation here because I didn't remind you of this before I started so apologies no, on that. But do you have a charity in mind that you would wish to support? Since I didn't give you a reminder at the start, it is putting you on the spot.
No, it's fine. Look, and I guess, you know what, we have a blend, Bernard, as you will have seen over the summits over the years around charity partners that we pick, you know, and I guess one of the standouts this year of work that we want to do, you know, so we're spending a lot of time helping evolve Team Police, you know, and so this Team Police and Ethos are now working in collaboration to really look at the whole health and well-being agenda and seeing how much we can get from a sports perspective back in, and that's great, and we'll let them do that, you know. We help more from a perspective of relationship there. I guess the one, you know, and this comes back to a relationship that I have with Simon Cole, the Chief of Leicestershire. The big drive this year, and it's probably pertinent from a timing perspective that we see the Unity tours and stuff off, is COPS, Bernard. You know, that's
carefully survives it.
Absolutely. You know, and you know, and I think, you know, whether it's about those that gave, or you know, that, you know, the families and stuff that still, you know, are pained by some of the horrific circumstances we've found, then, you know, that's a biggie that rings to all of our hearts. And Bernard, you know, for me, that whole point about wanting to be an enabler, you know, is recognised all around that as well. So, you know, I'm not
an excellent charity.
Absolutely.
Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure walking with you around Wembley, along Wembley Way.
Yeah.
You're not quite going into the Czech Republic, and I think we're both hoping for a particular result, although England are already through to the next round. So,
true.
So on that note, Ian, once again, an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Bernard.